The next technology presentation is the role of digital sales playbooks in BFSI by Mr. Arun Subramanian, who is the co-founder of sharpsell.ai. Well, Sharpsell AIA is India's leading field-tested sales playbook automation platform built for a high-velocity sales team. Trusted by enterprises to replicate deal winning behavior and create sales campaigns at a scale. That's not all, currently being used by over 5 lakhs of sales representative across BFSI and pharma companies like Axis Bank, Tata Capital, IDFC First Bank, HDFC Bank, Kotak Life Insurance, Aditya Birla Capital, Torrent Pharma, JB Pharma, and many more. Well, Arun Subramanian is a co-founder and a chief business officer at sharpsell.ai and intermediate a traveler and technological marvel. He is also someone who draws his energy from understanding the pain points of clients and bringing down data-driven insight to overcome them. Well, Arun also holds a bachelor degree in mechanical engineering and he is also an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. Can we have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our next session presenter, Arun Subramanian.
Thank you. So I think today I wanted to speak about digital sales playbooks. And I think one of the questions, and we were talking about this, to some of the other panelists here, their first question was, hey, then what is really a playbook? So maybe we'll start with that definition before getting into what the digital part is and how these playbooks can actually evolve. And before that, I think the introduction was already made, so I'll not spend too much time with this. We've won a lot of awards. As Sharpsell, we work with a lot of companies. Our clients are primarily in BFSI. We started with insurance, work with banks, work with NBFCs. A few of our select client logos here. Let's come back to what this definition is. So for us, we define playbook as a co-pilot or a guide, which is available with the salesperson at any point of time. Which is repeatable and enforceable at scale, because one of the things that we've seen is a lot of initiatives can be done, but is it going to be repeatable? Is your salesperson on the field going to do it again and again and again? Can it be scaled across the length and breadth of the country? And how do we ensure that by using this guide or playbook, your salesperson can exhibit winning behaviors? So I think this is how we define playbook as, and how are we going to look at this in the context of sales. And for us, a few examples or parallels that we could draw is, imagine soldiers marching, or imagine, let's say, a football team playing, passing the ball around, everybody running, which seemingly does not make sense because they're running away from the ball, or you have like an orchestra playing. So what is common amongst all this is that everybody has a sense of why certain things are being done a certain way, and even though they're not going to get that gratification or their high at that point of time, people still continue doing that. And it's all about bringing, harmony where you know that there is consistency among what is happening down there, and there is predictability so that we don't just look at throwing one initiative and hoping that it works or doesn't work. So the question that comes in is saying, hey, Arun, but a lot of what you say seems to be happening already. So why is it different, and how does it even fit in? So today, if you see, there's a lot of there's a lot of initiatives that run today. For example, there are learning initiatives, there are product training initiatives, you have content repositories, you have sales MIS, you have reports, you have reviews. So it's not that none of this is happening, but the main problem that we see is most of these operate in their own silos and are not really seamless. And for the salesperson who's out there, one initiative is driven by the learning person. So this guy will call and say, yaar, khatam nahi hua ye module. Then you go do it. Then somebody else will come and say, hey, we plan to do 5 logins of product X. What happened to that? Then you say, oh my God, let me go and do that. So it's all like running absolutely in parallel. And for the guy on the field, they don't really see all this converging and adding up to one. And the reality is that when we say there's a lot of inputs given, the expectation is that we'll give the salesperson a lot of input, which means you kind of give them information, you kind of give them training. And the hope is that they're able to understand everything that is thrown at them. They're going to retain it over a period of time. And when and if they kind of come across a situation where they can use what they have understood, either in terms of a process, knowledge, skill, they're able to kind of call it back from their memory, use it at the right time in front of the customer and deliver it right. So to me, these are like too many points where things slip up, because that the reality of the guy on the front line is that they didn't really come here looking for that sales job. They wanted some job, they got the sales job, they are here. More than 60% of people don't hit their incentives, but they still have their job. So the reality is that there is a kind of person who's taking up this job, and most of them are not really absolutely passionate about this, nor do they have the skill set to do this. So our question was to say, hey, if this is the reality of what happens on the field, then how do we still ensure that you bring about some consistency in the way they go about doing their business? So we said, instead of looking at the objective of, getting this person up, raising the bar in this person, we said, let's only focus on the objective, saying, how do we ensure that the customers hear what we want them to hear? How do we ensure that there are things that don't get lost in translation? And how do we ensure that we are able to impress upon the customer, even though we're going to use this salesperson as a conduit? The information is going to go via the salesperson, but I am not going to expect that they're going to remember everything and do that. And this is where the whole playbook part comes in. And for us, the playbook has two axes. So one is what you call a selling life cycle, which means the first time that a customer gets to know about us, from the time they kind of log in, or they kind of have this dispersal in terms of loans, or let's say they issue a policy in terms of insurance, from the time they first connect to us to the time they become a customer is one cycle. The second cycle is your employee life cycle, or your salesperson life cycle, in the case where somebody new walks into our organization, and how are they going to start understanding our product, our system, our way of selling, and how are they going to keep proceeding as they stay in the organization for a long time. So we said, as part of both these axes, the question is to say, how are you going to have this guide that is going to help people across every sales cycle, and how are they going to help? How is this guide going to help them across the time that they spend in the organization, right from the time they join till the time they quit? And one of the other challenges that we also see with this reality is, hey, I know I have to do all this, but a lot of times organizations come and say, you know what, content creation is a major pain in the back. Because every time I have to create content, it becomes fairly expensive. It is a struggle. I have to go through multiple layers of approval. So a lot of times, one content that's created long ago just stays in the system, and everybody's, when you go and ask people saying, hey, do we have content for this new product? They say, hai mere paas. But if you really look at this, that's probably a marketing brochure that came in, which a sales guy will never actually use in the flow of their conversation. Then you have, then we say, hey, you have to make customized pitches. But then question is, are we able to give them some customized pitches based on persona, based on specific customer reality? We have ideas on what to do it, but a lot of times it kind of ends up not getting implemented, because that then becomes like an IT project where you say, I have an idea, I'll go implement it, I'll kind of have some engineering team work on it, blah, blah, and that's like a non-starter, because the moment you say that that's going to be something that you're building, that goes for a toss. And then of course you have multiple tools, and the biggest challenge here is how are you going to drive adoption, because the reality is all these initiatives are separate, and because these initiatives are separate, the tools that each of these initiatives use to drive on is also a lot of times very different. And for this guy on the field, if you say that there are 10 things that you can focus on, 5 apps that you download, etc., that becomes a non-starter. And that also comes to the second part where when we look at it from a salesperson perspective, the question is, hey, how am I going to do all this? Because I understand these are 10 initiatives that are running. I know that they are for my good, but how do I really get this implemented, and how do I really ensure that I'm able to use a lot of this? And finally, how do we kind of bring these things as part of the sales process instead of something that goes around the sales process? And this is where sharpsell sales playbooks really come in. And one of the things that we wanted to clarify was, one is your CRM typically tells you what to do, and your playbooks typically tell you how to do it. A CRM may take you and say, go talk to this customer. But what do you do once you're in front of the customer is where the playbook really comes in. And the way we look at the whole playbook dimension is on 3 layers. See, on first layer, we say what is going to be the core of what a playbook should be. So this is typically what your end user or your salesperson really looks at. So they say, you have to look at just-in-time content that they can use in front of the customer. Some learning journeys are part of it. We'll have to help them create some personalized content, some posters, etc., etc. The next layer is what we call an enterprise layer, where the whole idea of enterprise layer is beyond what the end user is seeing. How are you going to help people who are driving these programs implement this playbook real fast and keep implementing it over a continuous period of time? Because usually initiatives start off really well, there is always a focus, but our question was to say, how do you ensure that this keeps running with the same rigor that we started off with? Because that was the usually difficult part, because once a project is implemented, the key people move on, and it also loses steam. So for us, this includes something like how are you going to ensure that the enterprise layer includes a lot of things about how we're going to configure roles, how we're going to look at certain easy integrations, how we're going to look at analytics, security, etc. And the last part of what we see, which is the main problem, is with any digital platform that is used, there is always something called a VAS. We call it value-added service. Things that happen beyond the digital platform that almost always have to be paid for separately. So you typically sign up and say, hey, I'm going to start with the platform, but almost always you end up paying for things outside of it, which includes learning content. You can talk about lead generation tools, you say program management, you talk about content creation. So today, all this is extra cost that organizations have to bear to get this done. And without having all these three layers covered, the adoption is going to take a major hit, because the core platform is like a car to us. You can have an amazing car, but if you don't have the right roads and if you don't have the right fuel, things are going to fall. And there has to be a continuous investment that keeps going on in the enterprise and VAS layers. And VAS layer is typically an expense that organizations keep incurring month on month, year on year. So our idea was to say, how do you kind of integrate all this and bring some of this VAS into the enterprise or core layer, so that the vigor with which a project starts is the same way that it kind of continues going even after it reaches steady state. So for us, there are 4 dimensions on which we look at this playbook. So one is what we call a playbook preset, where we say for every organization, you have a playbook. Whether you may call it a playbook or not, there is a means or a method to the madness in terms of how salespeople go about selling. And what we say is, for every organization, for every function, there would be a preset, playbook preset, where we say we are not creating playbooks for you, but we are going to give you something like what we call made to cook, instead of giving you something like made to eat. So it's like saying, hey, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you what you broadly can do, which is 70% of what may work. And then you kind of cook the remaining 30%, add your own ingredients, add your own flavor, and figure out how this can actually work on the field. The next is what we call a headless platform, because today, for example, you can say, Sharpsell, what is it? Is it a mobile app? Is it a web app? Etc. We say it is none. Sharpsell is available where you want. So Sharpsell today, you want it to be available as a web plugin, it is there. You want it to be available as an app, it's there. You want it as an SDK, it's there. You want it as a web app. So the idea is that Sharpsell has to be headless, because we have to fit into the ecosystem that already exists, and we can't come back and say, we operate this way. For us, that doesn't work. And we have a few integrations that are already there, few more integrations. And for us, this is very important for the adoption. The third part is dynamic presentation engine, where how are you going to enable your salesperson to be very, very specific to specific customer requirements, and how can they create some of these presentations and talk within a matter of few seconds. And finally, how are we going to look at intelligent nudges? So for us, the way we look at it is the headless platform is where, the overall schema is where I don't really care about how the platform is consumed. But for us, you start with a playbook preset engine. Then you look at how you're going to use that to form presentations, and how you're going to look at having nudges as part of it. Maybe I'll just get into the detail part. So in terms of playbook presets, maybe I'll just show you how it works, and then I'll talk about what problems it solves. So for example, today, one of the other questions that organizations typically ask us is to say, yaar, but ye information to mere paas hai. What are you doing? Because I know about my products better than anybody else. And we say, exactly. But the problem is that information that you have today has to manifest in different ways for different use cases. So if you want somebody to learn that information about a product, for example, then they have to understand it a certain way. But if you want to use that same information to make an elevator pitch to a customer, that has to manifest differently. If you want to use the same information to make a detailed 5-minute presentation to a customer, that has to manifest differently. If you want to kind of nudge a customer saying, sir, we spoke about this 5 days ago, I thought I'll give you a quick reminder, it has to manifest differently. And the way we look at these playbook presets is that you kind of just add, for example, we have different industry-wise and product-wise presets. And what we say is, you tell us what kind of content you already have with you, and you tell us how you want this content to manifest. And once you upload this and you say what you want, we kind of use our tech to kind of give you a preset. And this is like what I said, this is ready to cook content, not ready to eat content, which means you change it based on what you think works or doesn't work. In case we have multiple iterations, etc. But This kind of helps solve the problem of content not being available and content having, and we having to pay extra for content. So we say this is an integral part of the platform. So the moment you have your basic content information in any form available, it could be content brochure, product document, whatnot, you can have this come in multiple forms. Then what's what we talked about, headless. So you have it in multiple places. Today, I think the most common ones that all of us understand is, can I use it as part of, is it available in Android, iOS? I think this is a question that a lot of us asked, let's say 3-4 years ago. Now we say, it's available in Android, iOS, you want it in progressive web app, you want it as a web app, you want it as, let's say, a Chrome plugin, you want it integrated with Salesforce, you want it as part of Microsoft Teams. So I think for us, it doesn't really matter. We look at Sharpsell in two parts. Like I said, the core is what the engine is, then the front end can be anything, and it can even work on APIs, etc. So that's something that we've kind of taken it as an approach. The third is what we call a plugin first approach. So we said, instead of saying that playbooks will have these 5 features, we realized that any sales playbook could probably have 1,000 features. It's just that, let's say we have probably managed to come up with 20 things that can happen, but maybe your organization is already doing 5 other things and you aspire to do 10 other things. So now question is, how are you going to integrate all that? We say, we call every feature that we have as a plugin. Which means tomorrow you say, I want a plugin on incentive calculator, for example. Then you build the plugin here and you're able to integrate it right away. So, and all this happens from the admin. So the whole idea is that this will be a engineering unheavy thing. So it has to be like low code or zero code, because every time it goes to engineering or product, it becomes a CR and it mostly becomes a non-starter. So our question is, how can you ensure that these changes are made real time and these changes are being done by people who are running these programs? So this becomes very, very important for us. And again, including something like how are you going to log in? Is it going to be email? Is it going to be mobile? Is it going to be SSO? So we said all this is now moved to the admin. So you don't really have to look at, having this conversation with IT teams again and again. So we said all that has to kind of move out and it has to be real fast. And the whole dynamic presentations part is about saying how can you kind of have different products? How can you look at who this product is mapped to? How can you ensure that role-specific products are available? How can you look at it as configurations? Do you want something to be mandatory? So the idea is that anything that you want, we realize that if you want to drive a certain playbook, it needs the blessing of 5-6 different senior folks in the organization. So if, let's say, somebody in sales enablement team starts and says, I want to do this. But by the time it goes to a sales head will say, no, yaar, aisa nahi hota. We'll do it some other way. Marketing head will say, no, we have to do it some other way. Learning person will say, hey, but this is not what I taught people. So what we realize is change is the only constant, and you can't kind of come back to us every time you want to make that change. So we said to drive some of these initiatives and to make these playbooks work, how do we make it as easy for somebody in the enterprise to keep going at this? And finally, I think the smart nudges part is something that I think we have looked at, where we say, how can you suggest, for example, selling a higher premium? How can you suggest selling a different plan? And how are you going to link it to what they've learned? How are they going to link it to what they can pitch, etc., is where it is. So I think this is something that we've been trying to do in terms of sales playbooks, and we've kind of seen, and we've kind of seen it work at the center, because a lot of what we're talking about is, for the salesperson on the field, and it is not really something mandated by the management. It is not like a MIS. It is not a CRM that you have to fill. It is more like saying, hey, in case you can use some of these, you're going to look like an expert. And for this, I think salespeople really love, using some of these playbooks, given that it becomes very seamless for them. So I think I'll kind of end my presentation here. And if any of us want to understand more about sales playbooks, I think we are waiting outside. Sharpsell has a stall right outside once you step out, and we'd be glad to explain how else we've helped some of your other competitors implement these playbooks. So with this, thanks a lot, folks. Appreciate your time, and